Welcome everyone. Good morning, good evening, whichever part of the world you are. So what we'll do today is, as the topic suggests, we will look into how to approach the whole install base intelligence solution, the platform part of it. But at the same time, let's also understand why that is important as well. So briefly touch on that. Because especially for the aftermarket teams in the industrial OEM space, in fact, in any space, aftermarket is usually very, very important. And to have a good grip on the aftermarket, especially for the industrial OEMs, a good grip on their installed base becomes very important. And that leads to the need of, as we know, that like more of a data approach to it, data driven approach. And that means that we need to have a good visibility of installed base uh, in terms of the data applications. So why aftermarket? So there are, I think, in any case, aftermarket is always one of the best lever to drive growth, because the margins that are with aftermarket, they are one of the best. But especially with the current situation in the world, what we are seeing is that with a decrease in the capex, the onus to get the revenue, the margins basically is coming more and more towards aftermarket. And then at the same time, we are also seeing, which is more relevant for the industrial OEM space, we are seeing the retiring workforce. A lot of experts are moving out of the active jobs. And at the same time, what we have also seen is that like there's a lot of ad hoc approach to things. There's a lot of tribal knowledge. There are people who know the things just because they have been there, part of the system. But again, I think the question that again comes back, is that the scalable way to grow? And that's where it's not just about aftermarket, it's also about like having a good grip over the whole installed base, which can further help in driving the revenues. And that's where the whole this whole notion of like having a very good grip over the installed base becomes very, very important. And why install base intelligence? Because once we have a good grip on the install base, once we have good visibility of that one, once the data is in place for the install base, it helps us in taking faster decisions. We can actually build much better, much more powerful AI and analytics algorithms on top of that one, and which can help us in identifying the predictive and the prescriptive opportunities. Because at the end of the day, what we are looking for finding new sales opportunities out there, which can be done on top of the installed base. And that's where the whole notion of installed base intelligence comes into picture. There are other aspects to it, like finding the churn risk customers, or finding cross-sell and upsell opportunities, and even finding the propensities of a customer, like who is ready to buy at the given point of time. But everything of this, if we really see, goes and boils down to one thing: having a good grip over the installed base, having a platform which can give us that intelligence that can be built around the whole installed base data. But where the problem comes? The problem usually comes because the way the data is managed this is more important, especially when the size of the organizations are very big. And in the industrial OEM space, it's not unlike the IT companies or like the Googles of the world. These companies are there for 50 years, 100 years kind of thing. And they have like so many systems sitting out there inside their organization. There are number of ERPs, number of field service management system, number of CRMs, and leave apart the ad hoc approaches, the spreadsheets that would be like flying all over the organization. And that also comes through a lot of mergers and those things. But what it leads to is that there is complete data, like a complete sort of data silos available all across the system. And then it becomes very difficult to do any proper insight or build any analytics on top of that one. In fact, what our experience has been that wherever we have worked with the organizations, I think the major of the time actually gets spent on making the data set right, making the data clean, preparing the data, which usually is like almost like 60 to 70% of the time. And by the time you are ready with the data, do the analysis, the world has moved ahead, because it all thing happens with a lag of time. So before we move further, I think DJ, we can run a poll. We just want to understand a little bit like where you are on your journey. because as we talked about, one of the major focus that we will look into is whether to build that install base intelligence internally or partner with the right, or basically partner it with someone else. So we'll just hold on for maybe 30 seconds.
Yep, that's right. The poll is live. I'm seeing responses come in. Let's just give it a couple more seconds. All right, let's get going. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and publish the results.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, I think interesting, and it's not surprised. We have seen that that's the a lot of people take the build route of that one. But yeah, I think what the intent of this one is also that what we want to lay down is all the levers that should be considered before someone consider building an install based platform on their own kind of thing. And again, there are situations where that does make sense. We will touch on that as well. So when we talk about the install base solution, I think beyond the business case of that one, there is a lot of technological aspects of it which needs to be taken care of once we want to start putting this solution in place. And if you see that, usually it comes from how do we deal with the data silos, how do we deal with the data quality, how we can prepare, how we can do the data preparation. And then once that angle is taken care of, once we have a unified data in place, then what is the data governance framework? Because it's not like once done kind of thing. It has to be a very, very continuous effort kind of thing. Data keeps coming, transactions keeps happening, and the system need to have the system need to able to handle the new set of data that keeps coming in. And then of course at the same time it has to evolve with time as the new use cases evolve. So what we have seen is that this is a very high level architecture which in putting everything in frame in the right framework. On the left hand side, usually you have a set of data streams that would be available, and that again would be sitting in multiple systems. It could be sitting in ERPs, it would be sitting in CRMs. But then what you do is that you basically take it through a journey. The first layer, which on the bottom, is usually like you put a data prep engine in place. Then you start putting your algorithm in place. But what is also more important is that what you have all the actionable insights sitting as part of your data models. You need to make it available to all across the organization, which would mean like some web applications, mobile applications, or open APIs, so that they can lead to basically more value that can be unlocked throughout the organization. And what happens is that this is what typically what we have seen, that like how it gets approached initially. So what happens that people take the data and then they usually write custom scripts and those kind of things. And once that is done, they will do some ETLs kind of thing, where again a set of tool sets would come into picture, or even people write their own custom applications. Then they would run some analytics again using another set of tools. And then all of these data warehouses and dashboarding tools come into picture. And what it also means is that basically the data has to be sort of lifted from one phase to the another phase, which usually becomes a heavy lift because of different kind of tools that are needed at different places. And usually in our experience, what we have seen is that it usually involves a lot of everything, basically dollar, time, lot of tools come into picture, and also needs a very, very different kind of skill sets. So now, once this is in place, I think what happens is that now there is that another thinking starts coming into picture, that can we unify this whole stack in one go and build it as part of a platform? Because usually what happens is that when you're lifting and dropping it from phase to phase, it is where it starts breaking up in a big way. And this is where it takes a lot of time and effort as well. So once we have sort of gone into this framework and we have decided, no, I think what it makes is that to make it a unified platform in place, then there are like different kind of considerations that would start coming into play. There are like software considerations, business considerations. What we'll first look into is the software development considerations, because when we talk about a platform, it's not a trivial thing. It involves a lot of things that go under the belly. But at the same time, again, I think it's also that important to understand that not all case is a buy case, or not all case is a build case. What we'll go through is that the different levers that can help you in identifying that whether it's a build case or it's a buy case. So when we talk about the software development considerations, I think it's what is more important that to first to understand what are the use cases one wants to target. And when we talk about software, usually I think the basic notion that we get is that a database, and we have in modern day world, it's like a browser or an interface kind of thing. And that's it. That's how an application looks like. If your use case is very simple, that's fine. But usually when the use cases are very complex, and just put a representative diagram down below that typically how a software stack looks like. It might be different in your case, but you'll still see a lot of elements common out there. You just not need a web application, you need a mobile application, you need notification systems, you need a better data governance, security, SSOs, and all those things start coming into picture. And that's where the complexity gets built into the whole platform. Once we decide that we want to really go for a very scalable and future-proof systems. Then the other thing that usually becomes important, the kind of skill sets needed. I'll not go through the list. I think most of us would be aware of this one, but making a software is no longer like trivial. Just to give an analogy, like probably human used to make their cars in their garage 100 years back or 150 years back. The cars used to be simple, but nowadays no one makes it. Of course, yeah, still some people make it, but it's like a career for them. And that's what they would be doing their whole life. So software has also like a similar kind of, they are in the similar situation in the curve. Probably 2 decades back, 3 decades back, it was easy to write it over a weekend and kind of thing. But now a lot of softwares, when they are at a platform level, when they are serving an organization, they are serving more than single digit of people inside the organization, they start becoming non-trivial, and they need a lot of different kind of skill sets to come into play to make and work it together. Then again, the cost benefit analysis, usually what happens is that when you are building it, usually the investment is usually very low on the initial side. But what we have seen is that in the longer run, because now you have to build a complete organization around that software system, it usually starts becoming much, much higher. And the returns also come with a lag, because it takes time to get the use cases in place, understand it, and then make it actionable. With the buy thing, of course, like the negative part is that the investment is pretty high on upfront, but then you get the returns also quickly. And with time, I think the other advantage that going for the buy approach is that you are basically get to work with a platform which is being used by multiple other customers of the similar time. So a lot of best practices get baked into those systems. Then the other thing is that about the multiple point solution institutional approach, usually what happens is that like usually what we have seen, especially with our with the ecosystem that we work with, is that it starts with like one use case. So someone writes something, then someone else needs a different use case, so it gets modified, or they write a different thing. And what happens is that slowly you get an enchilada of software systems that like, and no one can even make a sense of that what is getting connected with which one kind of thing. But there is a different institutional approach that comes with once you are going with a partner who has been in this space for a long time, because just because they have been working with so many customers, they tend to do it in a more institutional approach, and of course their bread and butter as well. So they layer it properly, and the best practices are basically baked into the platform, and so the returns also come at a much faster speed. Then other thing which is also important, future proofing, as you touched upon earlier as well. What happens is it starts with a simple use case, especially in the build approach, because someone wants certain analytics or certain thing, but then they keep on building on top of that one. As people expand, people understand more use cases, they want to keep building on top of that one. Versus in the buy approach, what happens that because the institutional approach is already baked into the platform, it comes inbuilt with a lot of use cases that are ready to make actionable. So that's why the future proofing is much better when the use cases expand, when the scalability is needed, and other functional aspects become important as the usage of the application grows. Then the other approach, what we have also seen is that people also try to build it over CRM and ERP. A lot of these things come with a capability to extend them. But what we have seen is that also, and we have seen stories, because it's not purpose built for install base, so it usually becomes a heavy lift. There is always the cost considerations. And what happens that with time, it also leads to a situation where you need a team to help with different kind of software skills and other kind of skills that need to be put in place and that need to be maintained along time, so that this remains maintainable. So that's why what we think is that install base relationship is actually, there's a layer on top of customer relationship management, and that's why what we feel is that, again, I think probably we are a little biased on that one, but what we feel is that needs a very, very purpose-built treatment when we are talking about install base, because it goes beyond customers. In fact, if you see our equipment that is sitting in a factory, or the equipment would still be there, the person who is associated with that equipment would keep changing, your contact would change, but the equipment would remain there. So that is a little different. The way we see it is that it needs a little different purpose-built approach to handle the install base relationship. Then there are business considerations. So what we think is that when to build and when to buy. When you have a small install base, it's better to build it, because it is even probably can be handled in spreadsheets on some simpler tools. But when the larger install base comes into picture, especially with multi-division, multi-product lines, it needs a much more specialized approach. Because at the end of the day, you also want to have a unified tool in which, because one customer might have 5 different product lines. So you want a little more unified approach when you are dealing with such kind of situations. Then again, when there is enough time and money to invest, then build approach works. But if you are looking for a good quick ROI, then usually it's better to go to the the buy route. And the other one very, very important aspect that we've usually seen is, and which gets a lot underplayed, is the cleanliness of the IB data. And that makes or breaks a lot of things actually. And that's where what happens is that, especially with the platform kind of thing, a lot of this come with a very, very good capability in terms of doing this data prep work. They can even they have the capability to even pull the data from not only structured but unstructured, like PDFs and all those things, so that at the end of the day you get a complete picture of your installed base. So I'll just sum it up. Again, it's not like build versus buy, it's a black and white. It's probably age old chicken, or it probably lies in the same category of egg, or which comes first, egg or chicken kind of thing. But again, I think there are situations where you might want to consider build, but there are situations where you want to buy, consider buying. And a lot of things depends on the kind of complexity, kind of complex use cases, the size, which basically should be driving your decisions. And just to cover that up, that's how just want to touch upon that, how the install base intelligence platform at Entytle looks like. Again, as you have seen this architecture, the architecture remains same. It has the capability to bring all the data from the different systems, be it ERP, CRM, FSM, or even silo databases, PDFs, unstructured data. So we basically take it through a data quality engine. That's the one place where we have seen that makes or breaks a lot of things in terms of the quality of the AI and analytics. So we put a lot of emphasis on the data quality part of the things. But once that data is unified, then the purpose-built algorithm are there, which are pretty much tuned towards the industrial OEMs. And then, of course, their mobile web application, open APIs, and all those things. Or the data can be pushed into BI and data lakes so that it is available for broader organization to leverage the value out of that one. And this is just a sneak peek of like how that would look like. It's just a map view basically. So you can just now see that like how your installed base is spread all across the world. So I think that's where probably it'll stop. I hope that gives you an idea that when you are looking for the build versus buy equation, that what are the different levers you want to consider, what timeline you are looking for, what kind of use cases you are looking for, how big is the data, how clean is the data. That should basically drive the decision that whether build is the right approach or buy is the right approach. This, I guess, we can probably stop
All right.
here. And yeah.
That was interesting. Thank you, Lalit, for laying this all out in plain speak. This is a difficult decision for most organizations, especially industrial OEMs, given the nature of the work that they engage in. So, thank you so much for running us through this entire framework of what factors to consider while building an installed base intelligence platform versus buying one. There were a few questions that came in. I think I saw two of them, so I'm just going to go ahead and lay them out for you. And the first one is around the cost structure for a solution like this.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. You want to finish? Or?
Oh yeah. So basically, the query is, how do you price, or how do you price a solution like this? Well, I think what they meant is a comparative analysis of how much would a solution cost when you buy it versus when you build it.
Yeah. So usually when you build it, I think there are like, if we look into, there are two slides that are important. You would need a lot of tool sets which has their own cost. And then of course, like you need a whole host of people, and you would need like most of the time people go for like cloud hosting, or even if they're hosting inside, so there is an infrastructure cost. So we can do some rough sum total of these one, and that would how it would look like that it would cost when we go through the build approach. And in the buy approach, usually I think so for example, like if we talk about Entytle, so what we do is that it's usually we've seen that it is way less than what if you sum that up total. Because what also happens is that being this as our core product kind of thing, and with any product based companies, this get amortized across multiple customers. So that's how the cost remains much lower than when you are going to the build approach kind of thing.
Thanks, Lalit. And the follow-up question is around the timeline to implement a solution like this. And probably, again, you covered that in some form, but again, a comparative analysis of how much time would it take to roll out a solution if they were to build versus they were to buy?
Yeah. So buy, I think case is pretty straightforward. There would be some implementation time, but with the build case, I would say that it's again not a straightforward answer. It also is a function of the maturity of the organization in terms of their software capabilities. That defines a lot. In our ecosystem, we have seen that people have spent like 3 years, 4 years are still struggling. So we have seen those kind of cases. So again, it all goes back to like how mature is organization in terms of their software capabilities, and not all organizations are equal in those sense.
All right. I think those were the two questions that I saw come in. So overall, a good show. I think we are right on the dot, 25 minutes. That's what I was anticipating the runtime to be. So Lalit, once again, thank you so much. And folks on the call, there's an email ID on the last slide in case you want to write to Lalit or reach out to us at Entytle. We'll be more than happy to discuss specifics of a build versus buy. And not every solution, as Lalit said, there's always finer nuances. Not every solution works for everyone. So in case there's a query, we'll be more than happy to help that answer that. So once again, thanks, Lalit, and thank you everyone for tuning in. We look forward to having you at our next event, which will happen on the 18th of this month, and that's around bill of materials. We'll be publishing the details shortly. All right, thanks everyone.
Thanks, PJ. Thanks everyone.